I didn't realize how deep certain words can cut until the moment they came from someone I once shared a bedroom wall, hand-me-down sweaters, and late-night secrets with. If a stranger had said it, I probably would have just shrugged and walked away. But when your own sister looks you in the eyes, in front of family, kids running around, the grill smoking in the backyard, plates clattering, and she laughs as she says it hits different. It stays with you. It settles in your bones. I remember the exact moment. We were at our usual annual family barbecue, the kind where everyone pretends everything is perfect even though half the family hasn't apologized to the other half for anything since the early 2000s. The adults talked too loudly, the same old gossip recycled every year like a well-worn script, and the kids played tag near the old swing set that always threatened to collapse but never did. I was standing near the drink cooler when my sister, Mariah, tilted her head back and laughed. She always laughed like she owned the air around her. "You know," she said loud enough for my aunties and cousins to hear, "I swear by the time you're 40, you'll be out there begging on the streets. You can't stick with anything. You're too soft. Life is going to eat you alive." The worst part wasn't what she said. The worst part was how everyone reacted. Not one person defended me. Some of them actually laughed with her. Some avoided eye contact. Some looked at me with pity. And I stood there, frozen, holding a plastic cup filled with flat lemonade, trying to pretend their words didn't sink into my skin, like slow ink spreading through paper. But I smiled. I always smiled. That was my role in the family, be the calm one, the easygoing one, the one who doesn't take things too seriously. I had learned early that showing pain only made her double down. Mariah was the type who fed off reactions. But the truth is, that moment haunted me. Not because of what she said, but because a small part of me feared she might be right. At that time, I didn't have much going for me. I was working a job that barely paid enough to keep the lights on. I was living in a small rented room with a bed that creaked every time I breathed and a window that didn't open all the way. I didn't have a big career plan or a long list of accomplishments to prove myself with. So her words stuck. They clung to me for months. But what no one saw, not my sister, not my parents, not anyone in that backyard, was the quiet fire that moment lit inside me. Because when someone tells you you're going to fail and everyone around them silently agrees, something shifts. You either break, or you build. I started thinking about all the times she had done something similar as we grew up. Little moments I used to brush off. Like when I was 7 and she told me that no one really liked me, they just tolerated me. Or when I was 12, and she told me my dreams were too big for someone like me. Or when I was 18 and she laughed at my college acceptance saying I'd drop out within a year. It was like she had always been waiting, expecting, to watch me crumble. And maybe I did crumble for a while. I kept my head down. I worked. I tried to prove myself quietly, even though every step felt slow and heavy. I felt behind in life, like everyone else got a manual and I didn't. Like maybe she was right. But then something unexpected happened. A moment. A turning point that didn't look like one at first. It came in the form of a conversation, a small opportunity, something that didn't seem life-changing initially. But looking back now, that was the spark. The thing that changed everything. The thing that led me down a path I never. I won't say the journey was easy. It took long nights, rebuilding myself piece by piece, but before I get to that, I need to explain how things got to this point in the first place. Because none of this started at that barbecue. That moment was just the breaking point, the final straw that snapped something inside me. The truth is, my sister and I didn't grow up the same way, even though we lived in the same house. We were raised under the same roof, but we got very different versions of our parents, our environment, and our place in the family. Mariah was the golden child. No, more than that, she was the family trophy. Everything she touched turned into praise. If she brought home a drawing from school, it went on the fridge for weeks. If she spoke in public, everyone bragged about how smart she was. She messed up, someone else was blamed. If I messed up, there were lectures, disappointed sighs, and silence at dinner. I don't think she did it to be cruel at first. When we were younger, she would hold my hand when we crossed the street, braid my hair, share her snacks with me. But somewhere along the way, the warmth faded. The praise she got turned into pride. And her pride turned into superiority. And my silence made me an easy target. Our parents didn't help. They didn't mean to play favorites, I guess, but they did. My mother called Mariah the responsible one, the hardworking one, the one who will go far. I was sensitive, emotional, a dreamer, words that sound harmless but feel like quiet insults when they're used to limit what people think you're capable of. I remember once, around age 15, I told them I wanted to be a writer. I said it during dinner, shyly, excitedly, hoping maybe they'd see something in me worth nurturing. Mariah laughed first, of course, and the rest followed. Not maliciously, just with the kind of laughter that dismisses something completely. My father patted my head like I was a child and said, "That's nice. But you should pick something realistic." That was the first time I stopped sharing what I really wanted. So by the time I reached adulthood, I was used to shrinking myself. I'd learned to take ribbing, sarcasm, and comments that were just jokes, that somehow always left bruises. I told myself it didn't matter. I didn't need their approval. But there's something about family, their voices echo louder than the world outside. Their opinions hit deeper than strangers. Because they're supposed to see you. So when Mariah made that comment at the barbecue, I wasn't just hearing her that day. I was hearing every comment she had ever made. Every laugh. Every dismissal. Every moment I hadn't stood up for myself. But after that barbecue, something changed. I remember going home that night and sitting on the edge of my bed. The house felt too quiet. I could still hear the echo of her laugh in my ears. I stared at the wall for a long time, and then I asked myself a question I had never asked before. Who would I be if I stopped trying to prove her wrong and started trying to prove myself right? The answer didn't come immediately. It didn't come quickly. But it started with something simple. I found a journal. An old notebook I had tucked away years ago, back when I was still brave enough to write my feelings down. The cover was faded, pages slightly bent from time, but it felt familiar, like a piece of myself I had forgotten I had left behind. I opened it, held the pen, and stared at the blank page for hours before I wrote the first sentence. It wasn't poetic. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't even a story. It was just a list of things I was tired of feeling. I'm tired of being afraid of my own life. That line changed everything. It was small, quiet, but it was honest, and honesty has power. That night I stayed up writing. Not beautiful writing. Not structured writing. Just raw thoughts. And with every page, something loosened inside me, like knots slowly unraveling. But writing didn't magically fix everything. I still had to wake up the next morning and clock into work, still had bills and uncertainty and the quiet fear of failure. I didn't suddenly become confident or bold. I was still the same person, but now there was a spark. A small one. The kind that flickers. But it was there. Around that time, something else happened. I started spending more time with someone I hadn't really noticed much before. Someone who saw me, not the version my family boxed me into. Someone who listened when I spoke, who didn't laugh when I shared ideas. I didn't realize how starved I was for that kind of space until it was given to me. Their presence didn't change me, but it reminded me I could change myself. And that's when the opportunity came. It didn't look like a chance at first. It looked like inconvenience. An extra task. Something someone else didn't want to do. But sometimes life hides open doors behind things that look unwanted. And without fully understanding why, I said yes to something I normally wouldn't have. I stepped into something unplanned, uncomfortable, unpredictable. And that small yes began the chain of events that led me here. Far from where my sister thought I would end up, far from the version of myself I used to be. But I'm not going to tell you what that opportunity was just yet. Because before I tell you how everything changed, you need to understand just how close I really was to believing I would fail. And how powerful it is when someone who is counted out decides to count themselves in. The story really begins with what happened next. And trust me, this is the part my sister never saw coming. The opportunity came quietly, like something that slips in through a half-open door. It wasn't dramatic. There was no announcement. No fireworks. Just a conversation with someone I barely knew. His name was Daniel. We worked in the same building, just in different departments, and up until that week we had only exchanged small talk in the elevator, the polite kind people forget the second the doors close. One day I was sitting alone during lunch, scrolling my phone, pretending to be busy because I didn't want to sit with the same coworkers who only talked about who got promoted and who hadn't. I heard Daniel sit across from me and say, "You ever feel like everyone else got life instructions except you?" Something about that struck me. It was too honest, too real. I looked up and for the first time I really saw him. Tired eyes, kind face, a tiredness that wasn't just from lack of sleep, but from carrying something heavy. We talked. Not about weather. Not about sports. Not about work. Real things. Dreams we abandoned. Expectations we were never able to live up to. The fear of failing even before starting. It felt like exhaling after holding my breath for years. Eventually he told me about a small community group he was part of. Not therapy, not business networking. Just people trying to rebuild their lives. People who felt lost but didn't want to stay lost. They met every Wednesday night in the back room of a local cafe. He said there were artists, people who had changed careers, People recovering from disappointments, people learning to start again. I almost said no. I almost brushed it off with one of my usual excuses. But something in me wanted to go. Maybe because the world outside was quiet in all the wrong ways. Maybe because I was tired of my life being something that happened to me instead of something I shaped. The first meeting felt strange. Everyone there seemed to know each other. I sat in the back, nervous, hands in my lap, trying to look invisible. But they weren't the kind of people who let others fade into the background. They asked my name. They asked what brought me there. I didn't know how to answer. I didn't want to say, my sister thinks I'm worthless and maybe she's right. So I just said, I want to figure out who I am. That was the first time I said that out loud. They didn't laugh. They didn't shrug. They nodded. It felt like opening a window in a room I didn't realize was suffocating me. But even as I started exploring things I hadn't let myself explore before, my family dynamic didn't change. If anything, things got worse. Mariah began calling more often, but only to ask questions that were really insults wearing a friendly tone. So, are you still doing that little job? Have you thought about something stable? Don't you get tired of just getting by? She said all of this like she cared. Like she was offering advice. But every sentence felt like another push downward. Family gatherings became something I dreaded. Not because of the noise, not because of the food, not even because of the conversations. But because I could feel everyone watching me. Waiting for me to fail. And the worst part was knowing they genuinely believed they were right. My mother would say, your sister just wants the best for you, and I would nod because if I didn't, it would turn into another lecture. But deep down, I knew Mariah didn't want the best for me. She wanted to stay above me. She wanted the comparison to always favor her. She wanted to be the one who made it so she could keep feeding that part of herself that needed to feel superior to feel secure. Around that time, Daniel and I became closer. Not romantically, just two people holding each other up so we wouldn't fall. He had his own story. His own wounds. His own version of the moment everything fell apart. And he understood something about silence, how it can be louder than yelling. Sometimes after the group meetings, we'd walk around the city at night. Quiet streets, flickering street lights, conversations that were more honest than anything I'd had in years. One night, we stopped by the river and he looked at me and said, do you realize how much of your life revolves around proving your sister wrong? I wanted to deny it, but I couldn't, because he was right. Every job I took, every choice I made, every time I swallowed my words instead of speaking, I was either trying to prove I wasn't the failure she thought I was, or I was trying not to confirm that she might be right. It's a strange thing, to realize you've been living inside someone else's judgment of you. After that conversation, I started paying attention. To my choices. To my reactions. To my fears. And the more I noticed, the more frustrated I became. Because once you see the chains, you can't pretend they're not there. And that's when the real conflict began, not between me and my sister but inside myself. Who would I be if I stopped living in her shadow? Did I even know? I kept going to the group. I kept writing in my journal. I kept peeling back layers of myself I had ignored for years. And as I did, something unexpected started happening at family gatherings. Mariah noticed. She noticed the change long before anyone else did. She noticed I didn't react the way I used to. She noticed I didn't shrink when she spoke. She noticed something in me was shifting, and she didn't like it. Her tone began to sharpen. Her jokes became colder. The laughter wasn't playful anymore. It was defensive. Because when someone has built their identity on being above you, they don't know what to do when you stop staying below. And one day, at another family event, that tension finally cracked. But that moment is a turning point. And that's where the story really begins to move. Because what happened next wasn't just uncomfortable, it changed everything. And nothing in my life, or hers, was the same after that. It happened on a Saturday afternoon, the way most things do in our family, without warning, without planning, without anyone acknowledging the emotional weight building in the room. It was another barbecue, another gathering where everyone tried to pretend everything was normal. But this time, I wasn't the same person who usually slipped into the background. And Mariah, she felt it. I could tell from the moment I walked in. She watched me closely like she was trying to figure out what changed. I carried myself differently. I wasn't forcing a smile. I wasn't nervously laughing at everything she said. I wasn't shrinking. I was just present. And that alone seemed to unsettle her. She hovered near me most of the day like she was waiting for a moment to test me, poke at me, see if she could still push the same buttons she always had. Family noticed too. The air around us felt tight, like everyone was waiting to see which one of us would speak first, who would break the silence that was louder than any conversation happening around us. For a while nothing happened. I helped set up the tables, filled drink cups, talked with cousins I hadn't spoken to in years. I felt grounded in myself, like I was standing in my own space for the first time. But Mariah wasn't going to let that be the end of it. She wasn't used to not being in control of the room. By late afternoon, people started gathering around the fire pit. Kids running with sticky hands, adults settling into lawn chairs, the sun beginning to dip behind the trees. I sat on the edge of a bench, Daniel beside me this time. He had agreed to come when I asked him. I didn't tell him why I needed him there. I didn't have to. He understood without words. Mariah stood up, drink in hand, the same confident posture she always had when she was about to perform. Because that's what it was, a performance. She lived for moments where she could be the center of attention. She thrived on being admired, respected, envied. And she could feel the spotlight slipping away. "So," she said loudly enough for the circle to quiet, "how's everyone doing?" She scanned faces the way someone checks their reflection, carefully seeking approval. Then her eyes landed on me and a small smirk formed. "And you?" "Still, figuring things out." It was a familiar line. A line she had used 100 times. The kind that sounded harmless to everyone else, but I knew what it meant. I didn't answer right away. The silence stretched. People shifted in their chairs. She waited, expecting me to laugh it off like always. But I didn't. I said simply. "Come. Steady. And that's okay." Her smile faltered just a bit. Not enough for anyone else to notice, but I noticed. She was expecting defensiveness, apology, insecurity. She wasn't expecting acceptance. She stepped closer. "I mean, you're almost 30. You'd think you'd want to have your life together by now." The old me would have flinched, would have felt embarrassed, would have felt the heat in my cheeks and the sting behind my eyes. But now her words fell differently. They didn't land. They didn't stick. Daniel leaned slightly toward me, not to interfere, not to speak, just enough so I remembered I wasn't standing alone anymore. My heart beat hard, but not out of fear. Out of clarity. A strange steadiness washed over me, one I had never felt in front of her. Before I could speak, my mother stepped in, trying to smooth everything over the way she always did. "Mariah didn't mean it like that. She's just teasing." But everyone knew it wasn't teasing. Even if they pretended not to. Mariah wasn't finished. She lifted her chin slightly, voice still light, but with that sharpness underneath. "I just don't want to see you struggling when you could try harder. I mean, nobody wants to end up, you know." She paused for dramatic effect. Then she laughed. "Begging on the streets by 40. There it was. The line. The one that had started everything. But this time something strange happened. Silence. Not just mine. Everyone's. No one laughed. No one nodded. No one shrugged. Even the air felt still, like the world was holding its breath. Something had shifted and everyone could feel it. Mariah looked around, confused. She expected laughter. Agreement. Validation. She expected the same chorus that had always backed her. But instead there was just quiet. And in that quiet, her confidence cracked. Her expression changed just for a second, but I saw it. The insecurity. The fear. The small part of her that needed to be seen as better, stronger, more successful. The part of her that had been building walls of pride for years because underneath it all, she was terrified she wasn't enough. I didn't need to call her out. I didn't need to insult her. I didn't need to defend myself. The silence spoke louder than any words. But she wasn't going to let the silence win. She stepped closer again, voice lower now. Not playful. Not joking. "You think because you go to your little group meetings that you've changed? You really think that's going to fix your life?" This time the hurt wasn't in her words, it was in her eyes. She wasn't trying to humiliate me now. She was trying to pull me back. Because she could feel me slipping away from the version of me she needed. And that was the real conflict. The real core of everything. She didn't want me to fail. She wanted me to stay where she understood me. Under her. Below her. Predictable. Small. My chest tightened, not with fear but with realization. This was never about me being weak. It was about her needing to feel strong. And I understood her in a way I never had before. But understanding doesn't stop a fire once it's lit. Because something was building. Something neither of us could stop now. She was unraveling. And I was rising. Everyone felt it. Everyone watched it. Everyone knew something was about to break open in a way that couldn't be undone. But the breaking hadn't happened yet. No one spoke. No one moved. The moment was suspended. Held. Waiting. And what happened next was the moment that changed everything. The air felt heavy, like even the wind didn't want to move. I could hear the crackle of the fire pit, the faint laughter of children far off in the yard, but around us, everything was still. My family sat in a half circle, pretending to look anywhere but at the two of us, though every eye was drawn in. You can always recognize the moment a family gathering turns into something else. When jokes stop being jokes and everyone realizes there's something real under the surface. Mariah stood across from me, arms crossed now, like she was bracing for impact. I didn't say anything. I didn't have to. Silence can be louder than shouting. But Mariah was the type who couldn't stand silence. She needed control, she needed the last word, she needed everyone to look at her as the one who was right. "So what?" she said finally, voice shaking just slightly. "You think you're better now? You think you're above us?" The way she said, "us," made it clear she didn't mean the whole family. She meant her. She meant the version of her that had always stood on a higher step, looking down. My father cleared his throat, trying to break the tension. "Let's all just..." No, Mariah didn't look away from me. "She thinks I'm the bad guy. She thinks I've held her back. But I was the one who worked. I was the one who did everything right. I did everything they asked. And what did it get me? What did any of it get me?" Her voice cracked, and that was the moment the mask slipped. Everyone shifted. This was no longer about me. This was about her. Her need to be enough. To be seen. To be valued. But she didn't know how to say any of that. So instead she attacked what she could. "You always got to be the soft one. The emotional one. The one people felt sorry for. And you know what? People like you. They always have. Even when you mess up. Even when you fail. They still love you. But me." She took a shaky breath. "I don't get that. I never got that." Her eyes glistened, not enough for a tear to fall, but enough for everyone to see she was standing on a fault line inside herself. No one expected this. Not my mother. Not my father. Not me. She wasn't talking about my life anymore. She was talking about hers. She stepped closer. Too close. Close enough that I could see how tired her face really was beneath the confidence. "You think I've been laughing at you? I've been terrified of becoming you." The words didn't hit the way she intended. They hit differently. Not as cruelty. As confession. She took another shallow breath, and the next words came out almost broken. "I did everything right. I followed every rule. I became what everyone told me to be. I made the choices they wanted. And I thought if I did that, I would be happy. I thought I'd feel safe." Her voice softened to a whisper only I could hear. "But I'm not." Her hands trembled. She swallowed hard. "I envy you." It didn't feel like triumph. It didn't feel like victory. It felt like standing at the edge of something enormous and realizing neither of us knew how to step back. I felt my mother stiffen near the table. My father stared at the grass. An uncle coughed to pretend he wasn't listening. No one knew what to do. We had all lived our childhoods believing that Mariah had confidence and I had weakness. But now we were seeing that maybe what we thought was confidence had been armor. And maybe what we thought was weakness had been something else entirely. Mariah's breathing was uneven now, like she was trying not to crumble in front of everyone. Her voice sharpened again, not because she was angry but because she was scared of how exposed she suddenly was. "You don't know how hard it is to hold everything together," she said. "You don't know what it's like to always be the one who's supposed to succeed. You think I'm trying to hurt you? I'm trying to survive." I didn't move. I didn't reach out. I didn't look away. I just listened. And the silence between us wasn't heavy this time. It was fragile. She blinked hard, willing herself back into the role she knew, strong, confident, untouchable. "But don't think this is some miracle transformation," she said, her voice rough. "You're still not where you think you are. One good month. One new group of people. One positive shift. It doesn't change your entire life." Her words weren't cruel now. They were scared. Afraid I might outgrow her. Afraid I might leave her behind. Afraid of being the one who was suddenly compared and didn't measure up. "I'm not afraid of you failing," she whispered. "I'm afraid of me failing first." There it was. The truth neither of us had ever spoken aloud. But saying it didn't repair anything. If anything, it made everything tenser. Because now we weren't just siblings in conflict. We were two people standing on different paths that had finally crossed. Paths that were about to diverge for real. And everyone watching could feel it. They leaned in, holding their breath, waiting. Something was about to happen. Something irreversible. Mariah's voice steadied just enough to regain her final edge. "So go ahead. Tell them. Tell everyone how different you are now. Tell everyone you've finally figured things out." She was daring me. Pushing the moment to the brink. The climax of years of silence, resentment, longing, misunderstanding, balanced on a knife's edge. And I opened my mouth to speak, not to defend, not to attack, but to finally tell the truth. But right before I said it, someone else stepped in, and what they said changed everything. It wasn't me. It wasn't Mariah. It wasn't even my mother or father. It was Daniel. His voice didn't rise. It didn't cut. It didn't demand attention. It simply entered the space, quiet but steady, like someone placing a hand on a shaking table to keep the glassware from falling. "Actually," he said, looking directly at my sister, "you're wrong." Everyone turned. No one in my family really knew him. He was an outsider, which meant he had no assigned role here. He wasn't part of the unspoken hierarchy, the silent system everyone had learned to obey. He had nothing to lose, nothing to protect. He could see the situation without history blurring it. He stepped forward slightly, but not in a confrontational way. More like he was stepping into something he understood needed to be said. "She has changed," he continued. "Maybe not in the way anyone here can measure yet. Maybe not in the ways you value. But I've watched her build herself from the inside out. And that kind of change is the hardest kind." My family watched him the way people watch a stranger interrupt an argument, confused, unsure, alert. Mariah stiffened. "This is family business," she said, trying to regain control. Daniel nodded. "It is. And that's the problem." The silence after that felt like the whole backyard leaned forward. He spoke calmly, but every word landed. "You all think you know who she is because you've known her the longest. But time doesn't equal understanding. You don't get to decide who she can become just because you remember who she used to be." My mother opened her mouth to speak, but for the first time in my life she didn't actually have anything to say. Mariah's composure flickered, not shattered, just cracked. Her jaw tightened, her arms crossed tighter, her eyes narrowed. "You don't know anything about us," she said quietly, but there was a tremor under her voice. Daniel didn't look away. "You're right. I don't know your history. I don't know every detail. But I know what it looks like when someone is trying to grow and the people around them won't let them." And then he said something I was not prepared for. Because I lived it. The backyard dropped into a deeper silence. Daniel had never spoken about his past in the group. Not like that. Not directly. He took a slow breath. "My sister and I, we used to be like you too." His voice lowered, softer. "Except I was you and she was her." Mariah blinked. Confusion softened her expression just slightly. Daniel stared at the fire pit as if seeing something far away. She was the one who always succeeded. The one everyone was proud of. The one who never stumbled. And I was the one who couldn't get it together. He let out a shallow breath. "Except one day I did. I found something that made me feel alive. Something that finally made my life feel like mine." He paused. "And she didn't know what to do with that. Because my growth meant she couldn't define me anymore." Now everyone was still. He looked at my sister, not angry, just knowing. When someone's identity is built on comparison, your growth looks like their loss. Mariah's face shifted, anger, confusion, hurt, something else I couldn't yet recognize. But before anyone could respond, my father stood, slowly, carefully, like he had been holding something back for years. And then he spoke. "Your sister is scared." Not sharply, not accusingly, but gently, unexpectedly. Mariah whipped toward him like she'd been slapped. "I'm not scared." "Yes," he said, voice not rising but firm. "You are." The shock of hearing him say those words hit the whole family. My father was not a man who used emotional language. He was practical, silent, a builder of shelves and routines and quiet expectations. He didn't talk about feelings, not his, not anyone's. Mariah shook her head, her throat tightening. "No, I'm not scared. I'm just..." But the words didn't come. She wasn't crying. She wasn't yelling. She wasn't falling apart. But she was breaking. Just a little. And before anyone could catch what was happening, before anyone could soften the moment, my mother rose too, but not to comfort. She looked directly at me and said something I never expected her to say. "You don't understand what your sister gave up because of you." The words sliced the air clean. My breath caught. Everyone froze. Mariah's eyes widened, not in anger but in shock, like she didn't know that was going to be said either. My mother continued, voice tight, controlled, something old and heavy leaking through each word. "She didn't get to choose half the things in her life. We leaned on her. We depended on her. She was the strong one, the reliable one, the one we trusted to not collapse. And yes, maybe we expected too much. But everything she did was to make sure you didn't struggle. The entire story I had lived, my entire identity, shook like a building hit from underneath. Mariah wasn't the villain. I didn't need to agree with my mother. I didn't need to accept her version of the story. But I couldn't deny the shift happening in real time. There were truths inside this family none of us had ever spoken. Truths none of us had ever dared to look at. And now they were standing in the open. And we were all standing in the wreckage of them. No one moved. The fire crackled. A child laughed from somewhere far out of place. The tension wasn't building toward a break anymore. It was the break. Everything was exposed now. But nothing was resolved. Not yet. The moment that would decide everything was coming next. For a long moment, no one spoke. The weight of my mother's words sat between all of us like something living. I didn't know whether to defend myself, break down, or walk away. But I stayed still and breathed, because something in me knew this moment had been building for years, and running from it now would only drag the story into another cycle. I looked at Mariah. Really looked. Not as my rival. Not as the girl who always seemed ahead. But as someone who had been carrying far more than I understood. Did you feel like you had to hold everything together because of me? I asked quietly. She didn't look away this time. Her voice was barely above a whisper. Yes. And then everything made sense. The sharp comments, the pressure, the perfection, the anger that never seemed to match the moment. She hadn't been fighting me. She'd been fighting the invisible job she was never asked whether she wanted. I didn't know, I said. I wish someone had told me the truth instead of letting us blame each other. Mariah's eyes glimmered with something softer. I didn't know how to say it without sounding selfish. That was the thing. Neither of us had ever been given the space to just be ourselves. My parents hadn't done it out of cruelty. They had done it out of survival. Out of habit. Out of not knowing better. My mother exhaled, her shoulders finally dropping. We should have shared the responsibility. We didn't. And we're sorry. Hearing her apologize, genuinely, was like watching a building you thought was unmovable gently shift into a new shape. My father nodded, not as a correction but as agreement. We all made mistakes. There was no dramatic hugging. No collapsing into tears. Just a quiet recognition that the ground beneath us had changed. That was enough. Mariah stepped forward, not close enough for a hug, but close enough that her voice felt like it reached me directly. I don't want us to keep being storylines in each other's heads, she said. I want us to actually know each other. Not just the versions we've been defending. I smiled, a small one but real. Me too. And that was the moment everything that had once felt impossible became possible. We began cleaning the backyard. The tension didn't disappear completely, but it softened into something human, something understandable, something we could work with. But as the night settled, the unexpected twist arrived in the quietest way. As I walked back inside to grab the last of the plates, I heard my parents in the kitchen, talking in low, serious tones I wasn't meant to hear. We have to tell them, my father said. My mother's voice shook, barely holding steady. Not yet. Let them have this piece first. I froze. Tell us what? Their voices faded as they walked further in, but one sentence from my father stayed sharp. They deserve to know the real reason everything changed. The real reason. Meaning there was still one more truth underneath everything. Something bigger. Something that shaped all of this from the beginning. The reconciliation was real. The peace was real. But the story? It wasn't finished. Not at all. And the next chapter would reveal a truth none of us were prepared for. I didn't sleep that night. I kept replaying those words in my mind, trying to piece together what they could possibly mean. The real reason everything changed. Those words felt like a locked door I had never noticed before, suddenly glowing at the edges, waiting to be opened. But I also felt something I hadn't felt in years. I felt steady. I felt grounded. I felt ready to hear whatever it was. The next morning I asked my parents if we could talk. Not in a dramatic way. Just all of us at the kitchen table, where so many years of misunderstandings had been born. Mariah sat beside me, not across from me. That small detail mattered. It showed that the space between us had shifted into something shared. My father cleared his throat in that slow, deliberate way he always did when he was about to say something serious. There's something we didn't tell you both when you were younger, he began. We thought we were protecting you. But we see now that keeping it to ourselves shaped how you two saw each other. My mother looked down at her hands, twisting her wedding ring slowly. When you were both children, she said softly, we struggled financially more than you ever knew. There was a point we really didn't know how we were going to pay the mortgage. We were close to losing everything. My father nodded. During that time, we leaned on Mariah because she was older. We needed her help with the house, with errands, with watching you. And we told her she needed to be strong. But we didn't realize we were asking her to grow up faster than she should have. I glanced at Mariah. She was staring forward, eyes steady, like she had already known every word that was coming. My mother continued, and on the other side, we tried so hard to make sure you didn't feel that pressure that we accidentally sheltered you too much. We didn't realize it made you feel underestimated. I felt something settle inside me, something that had been confused for years. I had thought my sister looked down on me. I thought she enjoyed saying I wouldn't make it. But now I saw that every time she laughed, every jab she made, every comment about the future, it didn't come from confidence. It came from fear. Fear that she would always be the one expected to carry more. I reached out and gently placed my hand over hers. It was a small gesture, but it was the first time I had bridged the space between us without being asked to. I see you differently now, I said quietly. And I'm sorry I didn't understand sooner. Mariah's eyes shimmered, but she didn't cry. She nodded, lips pressed tight like she was holding the moment in place. I'm sorry too, she whispered. I wasn't fair to you. I let the pressure turn into resentment. And I shouldn't have said those things. Not at the barbecue. Not ever. The room felt lighter, not because everything was fixed, but because the silence had finally been broken. We talked for a long time. Not in circles. Not in accusations. Just truth. Honest, human truth. That was something we hadn't given each other in years. After that day, life didn't suddenly become perfect. Healing isn't a switch you flip. It's a series of choices you make again and again. But we started making those choices. The next family barbecue was different. There was no mocking. No tension beneath smiles. No waiting for a sharp comment to land. Instead, Mariah came up to me while I was setting up the drinks and asked, "Hey, want to do something together next weekend?" It wasn't big. It wasn't dramatic. But it was the first step of a new beginning for us. I didn't become the person she used to mock. I didn't become the person I feared I might become. I grew into myself slowly but steadily. I built my career. I found work that fulfilled me. I surrounded myself with people who saw me as I was rather than who they assumed I'd be. And one day, I realized I didn't measure myself against anyone anymore, not even her. Mariah learned how to ask for help. She learned she didn't have to hold the world together by herself. She saw that life could be shared, not shouldered alone. And she softened, not weakly but authentically, beautifully. We became something we had never been before. Sisters in truth, not in rivalry. Years later, when I turned 40, there was no begging in sight. No bitterness. No comparing or keeping score. Instead, we were all together at another barbecue. This time, Mariah raised her glass and said with the warmest laugh, "You didn't end up begging on the streets. You ended up teaching me how to stop running from my own life." We both laughed. The kind of laugh that heals something. The story doesn't end with revenge. It doesn't end with someone winning. It ends with understanding. With seeing the human beneath the roles we were assigned. With realizing that sometimes the person who hurts you the most is the one who is hurting too. If there's anything to take from this, it's that your story is not determined by what others say about you. Not family. Not doubt. Not the past. You get to choose who you become. And sometimes the greatest power you have is not proving them wrong, but proving to yourself that you were capable all along. Life is not a race you win against others. It's a journey you learn to walk in your own rhythm. And forgiveness, when it comes from clarity, not obligation, can free more than just one person. That is how my story ends. Not with shame. Not with rivalry. But with growth, understanding, and peace.